I think it's time to start. I just, on behalf of the Center for the Study of Europe that hosts this evening, I can express my gratitude to all of you who have come and who have decided to join us this evening. I'm thrilled to host, actually, we are thrilled to host an exceptional guest, as you well know. This guest, in fact, prompted him to come, invited you to come. And we don't have often such a privilege to have a guest of that profile. Let me just briefly introduce Marie NDiaye, if I pronounced your name well, and Odile Kazmel, who is going to be the chair, who is going to be the moderator of the event, and also to invite you, those who are in love with art, to invite you for another event that we are organizing next week on Thursday, when we are going to have two artists from former Yugoslavia who live in Canada and the US. One of them is a writer, another one is a visual artist. So we will have also a small visual, let's say, thing here. I cannot call it exhibition because the space is not of such spectrum of such. We can call it that way. So stay tuned and visit our website and come attend our events and enjoy the evening. On my end, I can only say that I'm also thrilled to be here to listen to the presentation with you for my intro. Odile, for the time is yours.
Thank you so much. So it is always a little bit of an artificial exercise sometimes to be reading a biography of the writer, especially with your prolific, production was spanned over 40 years. What I've tried to do is really kind of give you a little bit of a context. We will have some readings. A number of our graduate students will be reading both texts in French and in English to give you kind of a tease your appetite. As we had, initially this was something taking place back in October, but I think it came almost for not in a positive way, because then this semester, two classes, and my colleague was here, Professor Mesh, maybe will say a few things about where you taught about the Chat Sauvage throughout the course, the class, both with undergrads and graduate students. And Tina is going to read an excerpt. Fred is going to read another excerpt. And then I am going to also, we are very privileged to have, in my class, we taught Le Bon Denis, which is one of the most recent texts published in 2025. And I mean, your biography goes on and on and on, and it changes, and it was for the better, because now I have even more, additional titles maybe to add. But so we'll have a few readings, both in French and in English. And what I've tried to do is kind of contextualize and give you a sense of what this presentation is about. And the fact that we have these two texts that we have been reading throughout the semester. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to say it.
Oh, well, first of all, I just want to welcome you and apologize in advance. I have to run out before it's not a comment on the proceeding. Graduate student viruses getting an award, so I have to be in two places at once. But yeah, so our class is on gender and authorship. And we read on Fabio Chat Sauvage, after, actually, we paired it with Urika, the novel by a 19th century white woman writer telling the story of a person who actually exists, a young Black girl in 19th century Paris. And then it was very, it was a course that dealt with history. And so this short novel, which has historical text, which was related to an exhibit on images of Black people in French painting that was at the Musée d'Orsay. Sorry, this is sort of, I hope this is okay. Anyway, it paired beautifully because the main character of the protagonist is someone who is searching to understand history and to tell the story of another Black figure, female figure who visited or lived in 19th century France and really grappled with the possibility of history and and the knowability of the past. And so we paired your contemporary beautiful text and elusive to complicate our understandings of the past and who gets to tell these stories and how gender, race, and authorship intersect. And I think I'm going to get my students here. I won't put you guys on the spot, but it led to a really interesting juxtaposition. So, and it's in that class as well. So we're really honored to be able to hear you when our students are here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. So I'm going to kind of try to gear my presentation to Marie NDiaye without telling too much about going back to all the usual biography that you hear every day, every time when you are invited somewhere. But just to give you a little bit of the context, Marie NDiaye, you were born in Pithiviers, in the Loiret, to a French mother and a Senegalese father. You're one of the most widely read and critically acclaimed living French author. You won the Prix Féminin for novel Musicarpe in 2001 and the Prix Goncourt for Trois Femmes Puissantes in 2009. In 2003, your play Papa doit manger becomes part of the repertory of the Comédie Française, and thus being the second. La seule femme vivante, voilà, d'être dans le répertoire. Papa doit manger, qui devient en fait la seule pièce à être jouée aujourd'hui par une femme vivante.
Jamais joué, hein?
Ouais.
Mais
elle est là, elle fait partie du répertoire, ce qui est assez formidable. You are so, you have, I mean, your career spans over more than 40 years, not just as a novelist, but also as a playwright. And you have several other plays, Papa doit manger, mais aussi Les Serpents, Hilda, Les Grandes Personnes, and your plays have been performed internationally. I was privileged enough to see Les Serpents back a few years back in the Théâtre Sorano in Dakar, and that was pretty amazing. Yeah, and you're also you have co-written, but you say you co-assist. You have been part of the film both by Claire Denis, and also about 20 years ago, but also more recently of Saint-Omer by Alice Diop. And what I love the way you said that you consider not that you're the co-scenarist, but your assistant. But in any case, you have this extra, pretty, performance part of it. In Papa doit manger, maybe I should indicate that it is also about a father that has abandoned their family and that returns to Courbevoie. And so it is about abandonment, it is about family, interactions, and that's something that you find there are recurrent motifs in some of your works through different characters, through also through the different genres you have been practicing. You have also been writing for children. I have a weak spot, j'aime beaucoup La Petite Diablesse. So we have all these many texts and all these many possibilities. And a number of critics, many people have written on you, and usually what they all concur is to saying how you push people outside their comfort zone and bringing some ambiguity, bringing also a place of silence, which is very much true in all the different, it's certainly in Saint-Omer, certainly in also white material. You have said in not just assisting that you've been inspired both by texts and films, and it is very much part of your writing to some extent. And so I will have a few questions about La Vengeance m'appartient, perhaps, where Vengeance is mine, that just got translated 2 weeks ago. By one of your regular translators, Jordan Stump. You portray a woman in La Vengeance m'appartient that came out in 2021, and then now was just published. Portrays a woman afflicted by falling memories and a tortured uncertainty about her past that threatens to become her undoing. In Le Bon Denis, which is the text we worked on, failing memory, doubt, and discomfort are again intertwined in the most compelling way. But it is also a text with moving scenes of intimacy, of vulnerability, that of a daughter that of a mother now older, whose memory is failing, or so it seems. In her interaction with your daughter, appears in turn vulnerable, cruel, manipulative, whose portrayal comes close to being unbearable. By page 2, doubts about who wrote that Bon Denis could be, who he could be, if he ever existed, and doubts have spreaded to the relationship with the daughter's husband, who seems to know about this Denis, and who too seems entrapped in his own web of anxiety, self-doubt, destructions, and secrets. Composed of 4 parts: the mother, the father, the child, and encountering or not the narrator's estranged father. The text is interspersed with photos of an older woman in the southwest, in France, Le Gers, Gironde, Bordeaux, somewhere in West Africa, perhaps as well as a young adult, photos of a hotel, finally in the final part. The destination given as the place where the daughter is heading to finally meet her father, and who might be, and then we discover there will be another Denis there. I'd like to go back to certain characters and protagonists, whether in Hilda or La Divine, La Chef or La Chef, Roman d'une cuisinière, or Vengeance is Mine, or more recently La Mallibre en Noir, Maria l'Antillaise, that's the text, Un pas de chat sauvage, et Maria Martinez in Un pas de chat sauvage. Un pas de chat sauvage was written and published in collaboration with the Musée d'Orsay. It has photos both by Nadal, both on the cover and back pages, as well as documents such as letters by Maria Martinez, by writers as well, recommending her. And maybe that's one of the questions I have is if you could tell us a little more about this text, about the origin and the inspiration, and what it meant for you to be collaborating and to refer to real person and person's change, and how it may have changed your approach to writing, and so how. There is musically a certain music traversing your oeuvre, through recurrent motifs, through the portrayal of characters of both crushed beings who show at the same time their resilience. Part of feeling this isolation and abandonment, resisting of self-imprisonment within oneself, preferring silence to words. Some of the La Chef prefer inhabiting the space within themselves. To many of these characters, their love of freedom comes first, and thus preferring to be alone. You write about intimate silence, that of characters recoiling within themselves, who are set in against certain landscape, that of rurality of the province, oftentimes in the southwest in France. Maybe that's another question I have, if you could come back to it, about the importance of the décor, of whether we are, if I go back to Le Bon Denis, or even in Trois Femmes Puissantes, the second part, or in La Chef or Le Bon Denis. Shortly after you were awarded the Goncourt Awards for Trois Femmes Puissantes, you and your husband, Jean-Yves Sandré, moved to Germany and lived in Berlin for several years. And it is part of one of your plays, Berlin, Mon Garçon, that came out in 2021. It is about a mother à la recherche de son garçon, and the way he has somehow disappeared. And I was wondering, maybe that's another question I have, where, how it fits in within, again, the role of Berlin as a city, and that has inspired you both, actually, both your husband and you, and then returning to France now in recent years. And some having to do when you left, also with some of the very racist, derogatory comments about why you wanted to, if you felt there was a fracture about citizenship, French citizenship, what it meant, and wanting to be somewhere else and going to Berlin as a place, as an alternative place. Maybe I'll ask about that. We also have, and that's where I want to maybe to have Lachlan. Maybe I'll present and ask you a few questions. Lachlan is going to read 1.5 pages of a translation he's been working on, Le Bon Denis. And so this is a treat. This is something we haven't had before. And maybe I'll let you read it. You also have questions for Marie NDiaye.
Yeah, that's it. Do you mean to come up there? Or do you mean to stay here? What's easier?
What's easier for you?
Oh, I'm having a second take here if that works. Yeah, with a big crowd up there. Okay.
We have a little bit of a crowd.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say, this has been such a pleasure, and while a challenge to translate, it's been incredible to really get down into the depths of this on like a word by word level, and also on like a larger structural level as well. So it's been a really special and exciting process. So I'm going to read the first, it's about 1.5 pages of my working translation. Okay. When, after hesitating for a long time, taking up fear and abandoned hope, I finally gathered the strength to ask my mother, whose lucidity was gradually disappearing, if she remembered a specific scene that still brought pain to my adult heart. With a look of righteous indignation in her eye, she stared at me in bewilderment and offense, and then, recovering herself, answered me gently, as one speaks to a very old person after having understood they did not intentionally make such an absurd remark. That what I was talking about had not only not happened, but could not have happened in any way. My father, whose face and voice I cannot remember, which is preserved in my childhood memory only as a tall figure, vast, eminent, and dark, could not have left the apartment in 1969, could not have left the weeping woman, door closed behind him, with her sobs, which I can vaguely picture again, her distress, in the tiny entrance of modest lodgings, have to me the frightening accents of a genuine memory. My father could not have abandoned her, my mother maintained, since, in the first month of that year, she herself had gone to live with another man, a certain dentist, who had welcomed with the greatest kindness the very young child that I was then. It was her, my declining mother said, who had left my father, not the other way around. And how was it? She whispered in a voice, sometimes accusatory, sometimes disappointed, depending on whether the day had seen her rise full of vigor or had left her weak and empty, that I myself had kept no memory of this exceptionally kind and fair dance. Maybe that was the first page.
Maybe Tina, you want to read a few excerpts from Un pas de chat sauvage?
Alors, je commence avec la suite.
Ouais.
J'espère que tout le monde comprend. Je vais commencer par la page 5, Un pas de chat sauvage. En 2008, j'ai reçu le premier courriel d'une certaine Marie Sage. Le nom est inventé, il me semble, qu'au délicat, de ne pas révéler son... Plus fort. En 2008, j'ai reçu le premier courriel d'une certaine Marie Sage. Le nom est inventé, il me semble délicat de ne pas révéler son patronyme. Non pour la protéger de je ne sais pas quel commentaire ou pensée défavorable à son sujet. Elle n'en mérite nullement. Mais pour éviter, si elle parvenait un jour à mener à terre sa grande idée de faire porter son œuvre l'ombre, de faire porter son œuvre l'ombre des errements qui ont empêché celle-ci d'advenir plus tôt, car alors on regarde le travail accompli d'un œil différent, on ne voit plus que les obstacles surmontés, que le labeur et l'effort. Une certaine Marie Sage demandant à me rencontrer afin que je lui fasse part de l'état de mes recherches de Maria Martinez. Quelque chose de déplaisant, de pressant et d'imprécieux dans le ton de ce courriel, de bizarrement haletant aussi, comme si chaque mot avait manqué de souffle, me dissuada d'y répondre. Et même sans y penser plus avant, je classais cet expéditeur dans les indésirables. Mais ainsi assuré de ne plus jamais lire le nom de Marisal dans ma boîte de réception, je me suis pris à me répéter les mots exacts de sa demande. Je réalisais que je l'avais mémorisé sans m'en rendre compte et que, sans en garder plus de conscience, j'avais dû, certaines nuits, prier le moteur de recherche de me dire tout ce qu'il savait de mes messages. Car si je ne gardais aucun souvenir de cette enquête, je me rappelais précisément ce qu'elle m'avait appris. La nuit, je ne suis que sourd. C'est pourquoi j'oublie parfois complètement que je l'ai fait, que je suis restée des heures durant devant l'ordinateur à tenter de pénétrer certains mystères, de voir soudain ce qui m'était caché, et sans la connaissance de quoi il me semble alors je ne pourrais m'endormir, que je ne pourrais plus jamais m'endormir. Je ne sais plus rien au réveil de ces heures effarées, profondément intellectuelles et hantées. Mais prodigieusement, je me souviens de chaque ligne lue, comme on se souvient parfois de moindres détails véridiques d'un rêve dont on ne sait plus par ailleurs entre quel mur, dans quelle vie on l'a formé.
Nous avons enfin entendu cette fameuse manigua noire à laquelle nos plumes poétiques ont essayé de donner un retentissement de première classe. Doña Maria Martinez vient de donner un concert, salle Hertz. Hélas, il faut baisser le diapason de toutes les réclames anticipées qu'on avait prodiguées à ce gosier nègre. Doña Maria Martinez n'a jamais eu qu'une mauvaise voix et une méthode l'avenant. Pour le climat parisien, il faut le reconnaître, a fortement avarié ce produit exotique. Le succès de cette négresse a été réel. Elle a dit avec goût, en s'accompagnant elle-même sur la guitare, des airs espagnols qui lui ont valu les applaudissements de l'auditoire. Madame Maria Martinez est de taille moyenne et bien prise. La couleur de sa peau presque noire au visage et s'éclaircissant au cou et aux épaules donnerait à supposer que c'est une négresse mauvais teint, mais il n'en est rien. Quant au sentiment de Maria Martinez, je confessais à Marissac, que je n'osais me le représenter par timidité. J'ajoutais néanmoins que les épreuves, les déchirements et les peines avait trempé son caractère dès l'enfance, que Maria Martinez n'avait pu être que solide, tenace et remarquable pour de la Havane où elle était née, arriver à se produire à Paris et que, grâce à cette force mentale, les moqueries ne l'avaient pas affectée profondément, tandis que les compliments et les marques d'affection avaient joué leur rôle vivifiant, pensais-je. Car autrement, comment aurait-elle juré? J'écrivis encore à Marissac que j'éprouvais à l'endroit de Théophile Gautier, qui avait généreusement travaillé à faire connaître Maria Martinez, une indéfectible gratitude. Il avait été, me semblait-il, bon avec elle, pour peu qu'on admette. Là également, qu'il puisse entrer parfois bassesse et déloyauté dans la bonté, ne la traite-t-il pas dans une lettre, certes ironique, de macaque, que l'on admette tout au moins que l'obligeance, l'intelligence, la délicatesse puissent céder au plaisir douteux du mot que l'on croit excellent. Mais, lui dis-je encore, sans Théophile Gautier, Maria Martinez n'aurait pas chanté et joué comme elle l'a fait dans ses premières années à Paris. C'est pourquoi, pensais-je, on ne pouvait, quand on portait Maria en soi, ressentir autre chose qu'une honnête reconnaissance envers Théophile Gautier. Il était son ami. Alors je le fais mien, tout simplement. Je me trouvais encore manteau sur le dos dans l'entrée de mon appartement. La première image que j'avais en tête à mon réveil, écrivais-je à Maria Sac, était celle de Maria Martinez chaque jour. Je fermai mon téléphone, brusquement exténué de converser ainsi avec Marie Sac. Mais elle m'envoya un nouveau message. Et moi, que croyez-vous que j'ai éprouvé ce soir? Je lui répondis vaguement agacé, qu'en avoir la moindre idée ne relevait pas de mes aptitudes. À l'instant où le message envoyé, je compris que c'était faux. Elle me répondait déjà qu'il me faudrait pourtant bien parvenir à m'approcher de cette question. Quelles que fussent à ce propos mes réticences d'universitaire, concluait-elle en se moquant. Je me sentis stupide, pas là, pas à la hauteur. Juste honte d'avoir cru nécessaire de me montrer arrogante. Alors, lorsqu'elle m'invita à venir l'attendre de nouveau, à une adresse différente, je m'empressai d'accepter. Il s'agissait cette fois d'un appartement du boulevard Saint-Germain, chez un certain couple Bastier. Marissac les avait avertis de ma venue. Elle me communiqua les 3 codes nécessaires pour atteindre leur porte. Au premier étage de cet immeuble boursouflé, gonflé de strucs, de cariatides, de colonnettes. Une domestique à la peau très noire m'introduit dans un salon déjà rempli de visiteurs. Et lorsque cette domestique s'en alla, Maria Sac, assise sur une courte estrade, demeura seule femme noire et seule femme jeune de l'assemblée. Ce que je remarquai dans un trouble sentiment de tristesse jalouse, car j'aspirais violemment et sombrement, depuis que Maria Martinez s'était établie dans mon existence, à devenir une jeune femme noire. Mais la petite voix sèche qui venait toujours dans mes rêves, contredire les rares images de ma béatitude, m'assurait que cela ne se reproduirait jamais, que ce désir complaisant et absurde jamais ne pourrait être exaucé. Jamais plus je ne serais jeune et heureuse et libre, et j'allais au contraire de plus en plus rapidement prendre le genre de traits, de silhouettes, de mines que je voyais au couple Bastier, à qui la domestique m'avait présenté 2 vieilles personnes au visage similaire, figées dans la conjonction et une sorte d'effarement permanent. Cette expression de solennité ne varia pas quand Maria Sac entonna ses étranges chansons. Je m'arrête là.
Now we're switching to Katie Vernon, who is going to read actually parts in English and some little ones and some excerpts in French.
So it's not much. Okay. So these are the excerpts from La Vengeance m'appartient. L'homme qui, le 5 février 2019,
entra timidement, presque craintivement, dans son cabinet. Madame Suzanne sut aussitôt qu'elle l'avait déjà rencontré longtemps auparavant et en un lieu dont le souvenir lui revint si précisément, si brutalement, qu'elle eut l'impression d'un coup violent porté à son front. Madame Suzanne, maître Suzanne, excusez-moi, mettait une certaine coquetterie à laisser entendre auprès de ses amis qu'elle se souciait fort peu du standing de son véhicule, qu'elle s'arrangeait très bien de conduire une Twingo de 20 ans toute cabossée, même qu'elle trouvait plaisir à se montrer indifférente à d'aussi conventionnelles questions de prestige. Maître Suzanne ne détestait pas que ses amis l'imaginent ainsi libre, folâtre, indépendante d'esprit, et espérant son fort intérieur de telles appréciations finirait par la modeler, par la contraindre de s'y ajuster et qu'elle deviendrait réellement une femme au charme discrètement excentrique. Maître Suzanne savait qu'elle se forgeait sur ce point des fantasmes. And then some excerpts in English from Vengeance's Mind, translated by John Stump. Freezing rain had put the tram out of service when she went home that night. Had it only been the day before, feeling her shoes slip on the frozen pavement, her first thought would have been for Sharon. I hope she managed to catch the tram in time, Maître Suzanne would have told herself, not liking to see her housekeeper ride off in the cold and dark on her bicycle. But this night she didn't think of Sharon, absorbed as she was in recalling every detail of Principau's visit, already feeling anxious when she realized that some of his words hadn't indelibly fixed themselves in her memory. Had he said, my wife or my spouse? Had he used her first name, or did Suzanne think she remembered it that way because she'd read the name Marilyn in the newspaper? Impatient to be back in her apartment so she could write down everything she had left in her head. Who was Gilles Principau to her? And so, opening the door and finding every light ablaze in the hallway, the dining room, and the kitchen, she was briefly afraid, having forgotten that Sharon might still be there, even with the tram shut down, despite Maître Suzanne's many reminders that she was free to go home whenever she thought best, whether the work, of which there was, in truth, so little, was finished or not. Maître Suzanne had always said or suggested to Sharon that she would rather know Sharon was tranquilly looking after her children, helping them with their homework and judiciously thinking of their futures, than find her working here late in the day. It makes me uncomfortable, Maître Suzanne didn't dare tell her, that you think it necessary to scour a bath I never soak in, to give a weekly washing to windows that are already clean, and that I rarely look out of, and to scrub a toilet that I scrub every day, so as to spare you any contact with my intimate functions. Yes, Maître Suzanne didn't dare tell her. It makes me very uncomfortable that you take my wish to employ someone to look after my interior so literally, and that in your uprightness and integrity, you somehow manage to spend hours putting the finishing touches to a job that, out of modesty and consideration, I've already seen to. It makes me uncomfortable. Yes, Maître Suzanne could not tell Sharon. She, who until recently had never felt the need for a housekeeper. She who even professed an insurmountable prejudice against that need. Sharon, I employ you as an act of militancy to help you and to further a cause I support, so you don't have to prove to me how scrupulous, honest, and irreproachable you are, as if you fear I might not be satisfied with your work. I always will be, Sharon, because in fact there's nothing I actually ask you to do. Maître Suzanne did not say to her, again out of consideration, but of a different sort. Her heart had not yet recovered from its surprise when Sharon came to meet her in the hall. Maître Suzanne gave her the usual quick hug. She could feel her heart beating against the mute, serene, imperturbable breast that was Sharon's. Sharon, who never physically showed any sign, ever strong, fatalistic, and upbeat, that her life might be harder than Maître Suzanne's. Sometimes Sharon seemed even to pity her. Or so Maître Suzanne liked to joke when she was invited out to dinner and told herself she had to pay her way with funny stories, since she never had guests herself. She would cry out, heated and waggish, japing and pained, can you imagine my Sharon doesn't envy me at all? Quite the contrary. And her friends would laugh. And then they would put on serious faces as they tried to understand what could stop Sharon from grasping how far Maître Suzanne outstripped her when it came to happiness. What could stop Sharon from realizing that she should wish she were Maître Suzanne instead of who she was, an undocumented Mauritian, blessed but also encumbered with 2 children of uncertain future. And Maître Suzanne believed she had gleaned a deeply depressed husband. But wasn't all that just a jumble of speculation? Because the face Sharon showed her was never anything but tranquil, and her heart beat softly, almost imperceptibly. when Maitre Suzanne embraced her, her own savage heart vainly trying to rile Sharon's, to fill it with her own fervor and revolt. But why? Maitre Suzanne couldn't say.
Perhaps we go back to Tina, and since you were part of the class with Professor Mesh, you have some questions that you prepared and that you discussed in class, and maybe we'll come back to those.
Yeah, most of the questions that discussed in the class were around gender and authorship. But today, most of the questions that I have for today are concerned more about the philosophy and the place of photography in your text. And the first question that I have for you is that in the first passage that I read from your book, photography does not seem to stabilize identity at all. But rather it is there to introduce an almost irreducible kind of doubts there. And would you say that in this book, the image functions less than an evidence or as a mechanism that throws into crisis the very possibility of identification or not? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the place of photography.
Et donc Tina will also be translating the responses in French.
J'ai l'habitude de penser que je comprends les questions, même si je ne peux pas répondre en anglais parce que c'est trop. Mon anglais est trop basique pour que je puisse répondre de manière qui corresponde à ce que j'ai dans la tête. Mais même si j'ai ce fantasme de comprendre les questions, là, j'aimerais que vous me la traduisiez. Je ne suis pas sûre de l'entendre dans toutes ces implications.
Ok, bien sûr. Dans le passage que je viens de lire, le premier passage, la photographie ne semble pas stabiliser l'identité, mais au contraire introduire un doute presque irréductible. Est-ce que vous diriez que dans ce livre, l'image fonctionne moins comme un prévu que comme un dispositif qui met en crise la possibilité même d'identifier?
Bah, ce livre, enfin, dont vous avez lu un long extrait, c'est un passage un peu contraint dans mon trajet d'écrivaine. C'était donc une préface pour une exposition au musée d'Orsay, le modèle noir. Et déjà, je suis pas très à l'aise avec ça, mais comme c'était mon frère qui avait travaillé à l'expo, je me suis dit, bien, relevons ce défi de faire quelque chose qui ne me correspond pas vraiment bien et dans lequel, voilà, je suis pas dans mon élément. Ça veut dire que depuis que j'écris, j'ai à cœur de ne jamais signifier que les personnages sont noirs ou pas, etc. Et j'ai d'autant plus à cœur de cette idée que dans mon enfance, c'était ainsi. C'est-à-dire, la France des années 70-80, c'était une France qui se moquait de savoir quelle était l'origine des enfants ou leur couleur de peau. On était juste des enfants de la République française. Et moi, je trouve ça formidable, hein, qu'on soit juste voilà, des enfants d'une démocratie française, républicaine, sans relation avec la religion, etc. Moi, c'est une idée, ce sont des notions qui m'ont oui,
Habité.
fabriquée, construite. Et moi,
So she just mentioned that in this book that I read here, she just mentioned how this started, and her brother was working in exposition de modèles noirs, black models there, and he invited her to go there to take a look at the photos that were there. And then it was not of her interest. She was not interested in doing that because she mentioned that the things that girls were doing were not exactly the things that she wanted to see in that exposition. And she doesn't consider the idea that during her childhood in 1680 in France, she had the experience of being a black girl and being judged by others and others laughing at them because they were different. Although she had not this feeling in her head, this thought in her head, because she thought that they were all living in the same country, France, and the idea of in the French Republic and the idea of democracy and brotherhood, etc. She had this idea in her head, but it was the reality in the world in France back in 1680 was different.
Et lors de cette exposition, donc le modèle noir, dont l'intention était de montrer la manière dont les corps noirs avaient été représentés depuis les 3 derniers siècles, donc, surtout donc en peinture, un peu en vidéo avec Joséphine Baker, mais très peu. Et le personnage de cette Maria Martinez, qui dans l'expo, c'était que 3 photos modestes prises par Nada, de cette femme, donc qu'on a appelée à l'époque la Libre Noire, et qui était donc, selon les récits, puisqu'on n'a pas évidemment l'enregistrement de sa voix, qui était une chanteuse lyrique remarquable. Et mais ce qui m'a attiré dans son histoire, c'est qu'après avoir eu une période quelques 6-7 ans de gloire, elle disparaît. Et on ne sait pas si elle est morte ou pas. Enfin, voilà. Mais ce qui m'a intéressé dans son histoire, c'est que je me disais, mais être au milieu du 19e siècle, une femme très pauvre qu'on décrit comme une malibran noire, devait être presque insurmontable psychiquement, je pense.
In this exposition, the photographies that were there, they were presenting Black bodies since 2 or 3 hundred years ago. There were some videos included as well, but they were not too much. It was mostly centered on photography. And that's where she knew about Maria Martinez. She found 3 photos of her taken by Nada, and 3 modest photos taken of her by Nada. She was a singer, so she got interested in her because she has this unique voice back in there. But after 7 years of glory, she just disappeared. And there was no traces of her anymore, even after being so famous in her time. Her story in the middle of the 17th century is interesting for her because she was described as Malibran Noir, and she was so famous.
Mais cet écrit, c'était le résultat d'une commande pour l'exposition. Et j'aime bien les commandes, hein. J'aime bien les contraintes que les commandes impliquent. J'ai toujours l'impression que mon imagination ne se déploie que mieux dans des limites, des contraintes. Mais là, c'était juste la préface d'un catalogue. Enfin, je considère pas ce texte comme important dans mon imagination. Vraiment, c'était le résultat d'un contrat que j'ai passé avec les gens de l'expo, dont mon frère, mais c'est pas ce texte ne m'importe pas en fait, c'est pas important dans mon histoire d'écriture.
Translate and then we'll move to Le Bon Demi. And I think we have many questions from the class when we read this text, and I will ask students, the class, to ask maybe the questions first in English and then in French, so that not necessarily to translate.
J'ai compris.
She just mentioned that the contrast that she found in that exposition there just intrigued her to work on this idea. And she mentioned that this text, this book is not inspired of my imagination. It's not my imagination that starts this text, but it's the result of the contrast that I found in the exposition back in there. The story of writing this text is not is not inspired by imagination, but it's based on the evidence and the contrasts that they were found in the exposition.
In a contract, that was where you had to participate in a sense.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll move to Le Bon Demi, which is the other text we read, and one of your most recent texts. And maybe it's time for questions.
Yeah, I guess you want me to start? Okay.
Adam.
So yeah. Hi, I'm Adam. I'm in book cousin Adam's class. Yeah. So I prepared a question. I'll say in English and then in French. So reading Le Bon Demi, I was very captivated by the way that the four different stories have shared elements and but also have like stylistic and narrative choices that are very distinct. So my question is did you write the stories to be a part of a whole? Were they kind of in separate forms at some point? Or like how was the development of that in the novel? And kind of more broadly, why did you choose to differ the writing style between the four stories? And I guess what was the kind of thought process behind that? Je peux répéter en français. J'ai été vraiment captivé par la façon dont les quatre histoires du Bon Denis ont des éléments partagés, ainsi que des choix stylistiques qui sont très distincts. Est-ce que vous avez écrit ces histoires de faire partie dans tout, ou est-ce qu'elles existent dans une certaine forme avant de la création du roman? Et plus largement, pourquoi est-ce que vous avez choisi de différer le style d'écriture de ces quatre histoires?
Merci. Alors, la troisième histoire, je ne sais plus si c'est la deuxième ou la troisième qui reprend le motif. J'ai toujours cru, etc., que mon père, etc. Je l'avais écrit en réponse à une demande qu'on m'avait faite pour l'aide aux émigrés en France. Enfin, il y avait eu plusieurs écrivains français, dont moi, qui avaient écrit des textes publiés chez Gallimard et dont les recettes des ventes, enfin, mais bien maigres, devaient aider pour les immigrants qui traversent la mer, etc. Voilà. Donc ce texte, je l'ai repris dans le livre Le Bon Denis, mais les trois autres, je les ai écrits dans l'idée de faire de ce livre une sorte de kaléidoscope, dans le sens où, même si les récits semblent ne pas avoir a priori de relation claire les uns vers les autres, malgré tout, quand on se les rappelle, bien, les évidences, les rapports, les lumières entre les textes, comme lorsqu'on regarde voilà, le kaléidoscope, eh bien, nous apparaissent. J'aime l'idée, c'est ce que m'a appris Faulkner avec les palmiers sauvages, qu'on peut mettre en relation des textes qui semblent être vraiment très étrangers les uns aux autres, mais quand on referme le livre, on peut comprendre le sens de cette relation, enfin le sens de cette mise en présence de textes qui ne se ressemblent pas à première vue. C'était beaucoup.
I hope we can cover everything. She started with talking about the third or the second or the third story that has the same kind of theme here. So she started writing these stories because she was asked to help immigrants on France, and there were writers who were working on this already, who were publishing in Gallimard for helping immigrants by writing. So she started writing Le Bon Denis, and there's although we just see that there are four completely different texts, there are always a relation between all of those texts that are in that book. And there's also a relationship between Un pas de chat sauvage and Le Bon Denis. And she mentioned that when you it feels like they are different books, but when you close the book, you feel like mise en présence de texte. You feel like these texts are
in conversation.
And yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Also, the influence of Faulkner. I mean, literature is very much central to your imagination and writing. I mean, from reading from back as a child, and also how it became a conduit for both your imagination and your work. So when we read, we also need to read and think of all the echoing that there might be, just as we see in the co-scénario de Saint-Omer, where you have it starts with this amazing, I don't know if you've seen the film Saint-Omer, but it starts with this amazing scene where it's a scene of epuration and of women being shaven, and then you realize that this is a class, and you have someone who will be then following the trial in Saint-Omer, and is a professor. And she starts about Marguerite Duras, but bringing us back not to Marguerite Duras, just the text, but the film Hiroshima, Mon Amour. And so you are in conversation, I mean, with all these texts and films. It's so very rich.
Je reste très marquée par ce. Je ne sais même plus. C'est un texte ou une réponse à un entretien, mais d'Henry James. Il parle de cette fameuse image dans le tapis. Le tapis, qui semble être juste un tapis, mais il y a une image secrète qu'on ne voit pas à première vue, mais qui est là et qui donne le sens de l'existence du tapis. Et ça m'a toujours influencé cette idée qu'on peut écrire des choses qui semblent simples et qui ont de la valeur aussi parce qu'elles sont simples, mais qu'il y a cette image mystérieuse dans le tapis, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a un sens et des propos sous-jacents qu'on n'est pas obligé d'entendre, mais que si on les entend, vont nous amener à un niveau de compréhension du texte plus riche.
She mentions that its response to Henry James has always influenced her very much because she describes this image of the carpet, rug and carpet. That yeah, at first it seems like a simple image, just the image of the carpet or rug. But the interesting thing is that there is always a secret image in that, and the existence of the rug is always can influence this idea that writing about simple things is very precious because there's always something mysterious in simple things like the image of the rug, which is not simply an image of the rug. And there's always something in simple things that we need to hear and we need to discover. And if we hear the message and if we hear or if we see the image in the simple things, it can it can give us a chance to comprehend different levels of the reality.
Angelina, you want
C'est
to
pour ça que
continue?
lorsque j'écris, je me demande toujours, même si c'est pas avec des mots, mais je sais que je me demande dans ma tête quelle va être l'image dans le tapis. C'est-à-dire quelle va être la raison, le sens de ce que je m'apprête à faire. Si c'est raconter une histoire, il y a plein de gens qui le font beaucoup mieux que moi. Si j'écris, c'est pour que il y ait une espèce de compréhension de l'histoire qui est une chance d'être entendu au-delà de l'histoire. Juste l'histoire, oui, je suis pas forte pour ça, et puis plein de gens le font très très bien. Je suis une très grande spectatrice, consommatrice de séries, et je suis très admirative de la capacité d'invention de ces gens qui les inventent, les séries. En ce moment, j'en regarde une qui s'appelle, qui s'intitule Seven Seconds, et c'est magnifique. Vraiment, je suis extrêmement admirative. C'est une mini-série, c'est que 6 épisodes, donc il n'y a pas ce côté addictif où on attend d'apprendre encore sur les années. C'est très bref. Et du point de vue narratif, moi, je ne saurais jamais faire ça. Vraiment, je suis, oui, stupéfaite par cet art-là de la narration que je n'aurais jamais. Donc, moi, ce que je fais, ça doit se situer à un autre niveau. Jamais je pourrais concurrencer cet art de la narration. Donc il faut que mon propre art se passe différemment, et c'est un défi génial aussi, je trouve.
No. She mentions that when she's writing, she always asks herself not only about choosing the words, but she's always asking that in her head. what is the image of the tapis? What is the image of the carpet that I have here? What is the meaning of what I'm writing? Is it just a story or there's something else behind it? Because there are so many people who write better than me, way better than me. So what am I writing and what is the meaning behind that? And she mentions that she writes for a comprehension of the story, which changes, which gives us the chance to be heard. It shouldn't be only a story for her, it should have some meaning and something to be heard there. She mentions that she's one of the biggest consumers of the series. Short series, yeah, short series. And she really admires how the immersion level that is happening in the series. And she mentions seven seconds. She admires that series because it's a mini series and it's not kind of addictive that you have to follow the series, for I don't know, 15 years to just get to the end. It's a short series and briefly, it's brief and short, and she admires how the narrative style that they're having in that series. And she mentions that art comes in different forms, and it occurs in different mediums. It can be writing or it can be a short series.
But it's an imaginary that she would feel incapable of really tapping into. And so she's a great admirer of it, but knowing that it's not her thing. So maybe Angelina, you want to
So my question is also about the book that we read in Vanessa Hasnow's class, particularly about the use of the photographs, as we kind of mentioned before. I'm really interested in how the photographs were chosen, and there were also a series of photographs of Marie NDiaye, as well. So, in more particular, like the choice of her own photographs in the book, and then additionally where they fell kind of in the process of writing the book. En français, premièrement, merci beaucoup pour avoir venu nous visiter. On a beaucoup aimé lire votre livre dans le cours. Mais ma question est à propos des photographes dans le Royaume-Uni. En particulier, comment vous avez choisi la sélection de photos et les photos de vous-même. Et deuxièmement, où est-ce que les photos étaient dans le processus de l'écriture. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous. Je dois vous avouer que je déteste d'avoir des images dans un livre. Les images, les photos, dans un livre, j'ai l'impression que ça ne m'apporte rien, que ça me distrait, même un peu de la lecture. Mais la collection très et portraits, donc du Merlot de France, voilà. Et cette collection implique qu'il y ait des images. Et pour plein d'autres textes qui ont été édités dans Prix Goncourt, les images ont un sens. Il y a des gens qui racontent l'histoire de leurs grands-parents, donc on voit des images de la migration des grands-parents. Enfin, bref, la plupart du temps, des images ont un sens par rapport à l'écrit. Là, en ce qui me concerne, les images, elles peuvent rien dire. C'était vraiment parce que c'était impossible de faire autrement. Voilà. Autrement, mais ces images, je ne les ai même pas choisies, enfin, je les ai validées. Je n'avais rien de mieux à proposer, mais ça n'a pas de sens, en fait, par rapport au texte. Non, Enfin, voilà, j'aimerais mieux le texte sans les photos, quoi. Et ce qui me gêne aussi, c'est que ça donne l'idée que le je de la narration, ce serait mon je, puisqu'il y a des images de moi lorsque j'étais
Je
petite,
petite, puis je
Mais-
adolescente.
c'est ça. Voilà. Mais lorsque j'écris, je m'attache à ce que le je que je que je peux utiliser ne soit jamais le mien au sens propre du terme. C'est un jeu, oui, qui se fonde évidemment sur ma vie, mais c'est un jeu c'est un jeu de roman, c'est un jeu de fiction et la présence des photos me gêne dans la mesure où elle me semble effacer l'idée que le je puisse être de fiction, quoi.
Merci beaucoup.
So she mentions that she confesses that she doesn't like, she hates having photos in the book. Because she mentioned some reasons for that, for why she doesn't like having photos in the book. She thinks that it gives nothing and it's just distracting for her. But in Lobonelli's collection, she had to have the images. It wasn't.
Yeah, the subtitle is a trait autoportrait, and so somehow it is part of the collection where all of these texts need to have pictures, including of the author. And that's actually something I didn't know. You know, she did not choose select the photo that she had to validate. So it's actually trait portrait that selected the pictures that we see in the model.
For example, the picture of, she mentions that when people talk about their grandparents and their experiences, you know, she's not her who chooses these photos. It's already them who are talking about their grandparents, and this is the collection. So she admires text, readout photos, and we already mentioned shorter version.
Maybe a final question about, yes.
Bonjour madame, je suis absolument ravie que vous êtes venue, ça me fait beaucoup de plaisir de vous voir. Je fais partie de la classe de madame Esch qui a vu un chat sauvage, mais j'ai plutôt une question sur la traduction et non pas sur le texte, si ça vous va. Alors pour moi, ma question est comment choisissez-vous un traducteur ou une traductrice? Car moi, je suis élevée aux États-Unis, mais j'étais à un lycée français et que j'étais très petite. Alors pour moi, c'est très fascinant de naviguer ces deux mondes, le français et l'anglais, et de lire des romans anglais en français et de lire des romans français, par exemple, en anglais. C'est très fascinant pour moi. Alors, pour vous, en fait, vous êtes en train de choisir quelqu'un qui traduit vos pensées, vos mots, tout ça en anglais, ou bien allemand, ou n'importe quelle langue. En quoi c'est important pour toi?
Oui. Donc, déjà, l'écrivain ne choisit pas son traducteur. Ce sont des relations entre les maisons d'édition. Mais Jordan Stump, qui est mon traducteur
Plusieurs années.
Depuis longtemps, comme Claudia Scheuer, qui est une traductrice vers l'allemand. Et c'est une relation, enfin, nous sommes maintenant des amis, et des amis d'autant plus proches et de manière troublante un peu aussi pour moi, c'est que les traducteurs sont vraiment les lecteurs les plus attentifs, les plus méticuleux. Il y a dans un livre, dans un roman, j'aime bien aussi ça. Dans le roman qui s'écrit sur 2 ans, disons, ben, on fait des erreurs, on ne se rappelle plus si on avait dit que les cheveux de tel personnage étaient bruns et on les rend blonds 200 pages plus tard, parce qu'on ne se rappelle pas, mais le traducteur, lui, il se demande, mais alors, c'est volontaire, est-ce qu'il s'est peint les cheveux, enfin, que ce passage du blanc au blanc a un sens dans l'histoire et on doit bêtement répondre, bah non, je n'ai pas fait attention. Mais les traducteurs, ils sont obligés de ne rien laisser passer, quoi. Donc ce sont les lecteurs les plus exigeants aussi dans le sens d'une phrase. Lorsque j'écris un roman, des fois, il y a des phrases qui me semblent avoir un sens précis au moment où je l'écris, puis après, voilà, je passe à autre chose. Mais quand la traductrice, Claudia, me dit, alors, ça veut dire quoi, ça? Des fois, je ne sais plus trop, en fait. Donc, je dois essayer de réfléchir à ce que j'ai voulu dire au moment où, mais des fois, je dois inventer ce que j'ai écrit par- parce que elle, lorsqu'elle traduit, elle doit savoir, quoi. Elle ne peut pas rester dans un flou. Oh, bah oui, donc j'ai écrit ça, mais je ne sais plus trop que ça. Elle doit savoir le sens que ça a au, au moment où j'ai écrit. Et moi, des fois, je ne sais plus. Mais ça m'apporte aussi, je lui dis ça aussi, tu vois, le roman, c'est un grand bric-à-brac. Donc, des fois, dans ce grand sac de tout, eh ben, on peut aussi introduire des trucs bizarres, enfin, voilà, dont on n'a pas à prendre la responsabilité ensuite pour toi qui traduis.
Something I forgot to mention is that you are shortlisted for the translation of The Witch, La Sorcière. C'est un texte qui a été publié il y a quand même beaucoup d'années et qui vient, voilà, oui, 30 ans, et qui vient d'être shortlisted for the Pulitzer, shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Pulitzer in English, The Witch, and also translated by Jordan Stump.
Enfin, je suis ravie, bien sûr, que ce livre soit sur la shortlist de prix, hein, bien sûr, mais en même temps, ça m'embête parce que je l'ai écrit à 30 ans et j'ai envie de dire non, mais je suis plus, je suis plus l'écrivain de ce livre-là. C'est vieux, quoi. Mais, mais c'est remarquable aussi que grâce à la traduction et aux éditeurs étrangers, des livres anciens puissent vivre, mais
Avoir
j'aimerais
une
que-
nouvelle vie.
Oui, oui, mais j'aimerais mieux que vivre des livres qui sont plus proches. Et là, je dois répondre, c'est comme répondre d'un crime que j'aurais exécuté sous substance et je sais plus rien.
So first of all, she mentions that it's not the writer who chooses the translator of their book. It's most of the time it's the relationship between maison d'édition. So it's up to them to choose a translator for the writers. But she has too many translators right now, and she describes her relationship with her translators like complicated, and because they are the readers they're the pickiest readers, translators, because she mentions that 2 years ago, you might write something like someone has blonde hair here in this page, and then 2 pages later you might mention that they have dark hair, and then the translator, when they're reading your text, they would ask you the question, why did you do that? You just mentioned that they have dark hair, and then you mentioned that they have blonde hair. What's happening here? And you have to justify yourself and answer to those questions. She also mentions that sometimes they ask about the meaning of some sentences or some phrases, and I can't even remember the meaning of that phrase anymore because, and it's hard to explain, but they have to know because they want to know what exactly I meant when I wrote something. So I have to go back to the moment that I wrote a sentence and remember what was the meaning that I was looking for when I wrote that phrase. She also mentions that what I wrote here. Writing a novel and being in a talk with your translator for translating a novel is challenging because a novel, she describes a novel as a big bag of everything. And sometimes there are strange things in that bag that needs to be recovered and they be discussed one more time about. She also mentions that she's happy about the translation of the Witch, but she's happy and unhappy at the same time because she mentions that she wrote that book 30 years ago and she doesn't consider herself the same writer who wrote that book 30 years ago. She says that she'd rather her newer books to be translated rather than her older books.
Mais ce qui me rend un petit peu fière, c'est qu'il y a 30 ans, le motif de la sorcière n'existait pas et maintenant il est très.
Yeah, it was really avant-garde.
Mais voilà, je suis un petit peu fière d'avoir, il y a 30 ans, oui, mis en valeur cette notion de la sorcière. Mais maintenant, j'ai juste l'air de surfer sur l'air du temps. J'étais sur le précurseur. Absolument.
Maybe, Ahmed, if you want, as both Jorn in creative writing, I know you had questions about translation and.
Yeah, I mean that question kind of covered much, so kind of spread across quite well. And the other question about like how memory is shaped in fiction, the tension that's created, specifically in Le Bon Denier, the first section specifically, I guess I was interested in act of desire versus fact and memory, how those two things create tension and conversation between each other. And in the writing process, how they're balanced, I guess.
J'ai l'habitude de dire que que je ne peux pas m'exprimer en anglais, mais que je comprends tout, mais des fois pas. On va malheureusement.
Répétez votre question en français.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Oh, I don't have it in front of me, sorry. I'll probably butcher the case.
Talking about the relationship between memory,
Yes.
Yeah.
memory and translation.
Would you repeat that in English?
Oh yeah, so I was like about how memory is shaped between character desire and like what the actual memory may be and how those two things are balanced.
Alors, comment le mémoire est construit dans cette histoire-là et quelle est la relation entre les mémoires et les personnages?
Dans le bon demi. Dans le bon demi. Bah, dans le bon demi, l'idée était, je pense, que les souvenirs qu'on pense savoir et sur lesquels on se base pour vivre ensuite, eh bien, ces souvenirs sont peut-être faux ou troubles. Et dans le bon Denis, le personnage de la première histoire, a l'impression qu'elle ne pourra jamais vivre pleinement si les souvenirs de son enfance ne sont pas validés par quelque chose de réel qui viendrait de l'aveu de sa mère.
Il joue entre fiction et,
Ouais.
et réalité. Et des frontières poreuses.
Oui.
I think yes, if you want to translate, please, but
She thinks that the idea was that Marie in that history is based on her life, but sometimes these memories are not just the true versions of memories, they are false. And we construct our life based on these memories that sometimes are not true. For example, in that story, she talks about the second story I think you mentioned, that when he thinks about his childhood and the memories of his childhood, those memories are not matched with what he hears from his mom, what she says about his childhood. So he believes that we can never live fully because of this, like the memories that are not matched with the reality.
or the doubt has crept in. We are running out of time, but I want to thank you so much for all your engagement, and Marie NDiaye for your generosity.
Merci beaucoup. Merci infiniment pour votre présence, mais aussi pour votre présence en tant que lecteur. Quand on écrit, s'il n'y a pas de lecteur, eh bien, on peut le faire, hein, malgré tout, mais l'existence de lecteurs, c'est quand même un encouragement à non seulement à écrire encore, mais à tâcher de le faire avec plus encore pas de réflexion, mais d'engagement, de sincérité, c'est-à-dire il ne faut pas décevoir. Voilà. Et c'est une phrase qui vraiment pousse à faire de son mieux. Il y a cette nouvelle de Karen Blixen que j'aime énormément. En français, ça s'intitule Le festin de Babette, mais c'est pas le titre en.
Si c'est Babette's Feast.
La noire, oui, voilà. Et la dernière phrase de la nouvelle, c'est quelque chose comme qu'elle a fait ce destin, elle a mis tout ce qu'elle avait de créativité en elle pour réaliser un repas merveilleux. Et la nouvelle s'achève sur cette phrase, enfin, j'interprète, hein, mais c'est ça le sens, par rapport aux artistes, demandez-leur toujours plus. C'est-à-dire, ne leur dites pas, ben, c'est très bien ce que vous avez fait, etc. Demandez-leur, oui, mais après. Mais après, ça devra être mieux encore, plus grand encore. Voilà. C'est la demande qu'on peut faire aux lecteurs de nous dire, oui, c'est bien, mais après, ça devra être mieux encore. Voilà. Merci.
Merci.
She mentions that she thanks all of you for not only for your presence, but also for your existence as readers who are the ones who encourage her and all of the writers to write more. She just mentioned that your presence and your existence reminds her that in the prophetic of love, we should never give up, and pushes her to do her best and write even more and write the best that she can. And she mentions that asking the artists to do their best is the best you can do for yourself and for artists, I think. It is. You can tell the artists, the writers that okay, it's very good. The text that you wrote is just awesome. It's very good, but what else? We want more. So and this encouragement is very precious for her.
Thank you. For a fantastic job. We have now Vengeance is Mine. The translation, it just came out 2 weeks ago, in April 6th. And there is going to be the possibility of purchasing this translation and getting it started. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All our readers and for translation.
You know.